Hi there. Welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight, we're standing in the scorching Texas dust of 1933, watching a 9-year-old boy named Audie Murphy aim a borrowed .22 rifle at a cottontail rabbit 50 yards away. His hands don't shake. They can't afford to shake, because if he misses this shot, his 11 siblings won't eat meat this week. The Great Depression has transformed Hunt County into a wasteland of foreclosed farms and broken dreams, and you're about to discover why even your toughest day couldn't compare to surviving Murphy's childhood. So MA, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, let's drift back in time. You're born into a sharecropper's shack that's more holes than walls, where winter wind cuts through the cracks like accusations of poverty. Your father, Emmett Murphy, is what locals politely call no count, a man who treats responsibility like a contagious disease. He vanishes for weeks at a time, leaving your mother Josie to wrangle 12 children on land that barely grows weeds, much less cotton. The mainstream historical record shows the Murphy family surviving on cornbread and molasses for weeks at a time. But what historians rarely mention is that young Audie learned to identify edible wild plants from Cherokee neighbors, knowledge that would later save his life in European forests. Your education consists of maybe 5 years of spotty schooling, interrupted whenever the cotton needs picking or your mother falls ill again, which happens with increasing frequency as tuberculosis slowly consumes her lungs. You watch her fade from a sturdy farm woman to a skeletal ghost who still somehow drags herself to the fields. The other kids look to you, though you're neither the oldest nor the biggest. There's something in your eyes, even at age 10, that makes people stop talking when you enter a room. Maybe it's the way you never complain, never cry, even when dinner is just water flavored with bacon grease. By age 12, you're the family's primary hunter. Every morning before dawn, you slip out with that same borrowed rifle, counting each precious bullet like a miser counts coins. You've learned that rabbits feed in the early morning, that squirrels are fattest in October, that even sparrows can make soup if you catch enough of them. Your siblings joke that you could shoot the eye out of a needle at 100 paces, but they don't joke when you come home empty-handed. Those nights, everyone goes to bed with their stomachs cramping, and you lie awake calculating how many days the cornmeal will last. Historians still debate whether Murphy's later fearlessness in combat stemmed from this childhood desperation or from something darker, a complete absence of self-preservation that psychologists might now recognize as chronic depression. What's certain is that by age 14, after your father's final abandonment and your mother's death from tuberculosis, you're essentially a grown man in a boy's body. You've already learned that the world offers no mercy, that survival requires a steady hand and a willingness to do whatever's necessary. The softness that might have existed in another timeline has been burned away by Texas sun and empty bellies. Your mother dies in May 1941, coughing blood into rags while you hold her hand. Her last words aren't recorded in any official history, but family members later claimed she made you promise to keep the young ones together. It's a promise you can't keep within weeks. The state splits up your siblings among relatives and orphanages. You watch the family station wagon disappear with the 3 youngest, and something fundamental breaks inside you. Not visibly, you're too controlled for that. But neighbors notice you stop smiling altogether. You take a job at a radio repair shop in Greenville, soldering circuits with the same precision you once used to skin rabbits. saving every penny for a plan that's forming in your mind. The radio repair shop pays 30 cents an hour, and you're working 12-hour days. Your fingertips burn raw from soldering iron mishaps that you never mention. Every Friday, you hand most of your pay to your older sister Corinne, who's taken in as many siblings as her husband will tolerate. The rest goes into a coffee can hidden behind loose boards in your rented room, your escape fund. You've been reading newspaper accounts of the war in Europe, and while other teenagers dream of baseball glory, you're dreaming of army uniforms and regular meals. The recruiting station is only 4 blocks away, taunting you every morning as you walk to work. Your first attempt at enlistment happens on your 17th birthday in June 1942. You stride into the Marine Corps recruiting office wearing your only good shirt, which hangs on your 110-pound frame like a tent. The sergeant takes one look at your 5'5" skeleton and doesn't even bother with the paperwork. "Son," he says, not unkindly, "come back when you've grown into a man's body." The Navy recruiter is less polite. He actually laughs. The Army sergeant at least lets you fill out forms before rejecting you for being underweight and underage. You forge your sister's signature on the parental consent form, but it doesn't matter. Even with the war-demanding bodies, you're too small for cannon fodder. What the official biographies gloss over is that you spend the next 6 months essentially force-feeding yourself, choking down every calorie you can afford or scavenge. You lift makeshift weights, paint cans filled with concrete, in your room until your arms shake. You study military manuals borrowed from the library, memorizing rank structures and basic drill commands. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Henderson, finds you asleep at a table one evening, your head pillowed on a field manual, and she doesn't wake you. Instead, she leaves a sandwich wrapped in wax paper beside your hand. These small kindnesses are so rare in your life that you remember them decades later. By December, you've gained maybe 15 pounds, mostly through sheer determination and a diet of peanut butter sandwiches that would horrify nutritionists. You try the army again, this time in Dallas, where they don't know your history. The doctor examining you is exhausted. He's been processing farm boys all day, most of them eager to escape poverty through military service. When he marks your weight at 112 pounds, you see him hesitate. The minimum is 120, but something in your eyes makes him pause. Historians still argue whether he was moved by patriotic fervour or simple pity when he wrote 130 on your form. Either way, you're in. Basic training at Camp Walters should break you, but you've been broken and rebuilt so many times already that the drill sergeant's screaming barely registers, while other recruits sob into their pillows from homesickness. You're lying in an actual bed with a full stomach for the first time in years, thinking this must be what heaven feels like. The forced marches that leave corn-fed farm boys puking in ditches. You've been walking 15 miles a day since childhood. The early morning revelry? You've been up before dawn for a decade. The only thing that surprises you is the waste. Food thrown away, ammunition spent carelessly, equipment treated roughly. You save every penny of your private's pay, sending most of it to Corinne. Your drill sergeant, a whiskey-voiced veteran named Holcomb, notices something different about you during bayonet training, while other recruits grunt and yell as ordered, stabbing at sandbag dummies with theatrical aggression. You work in silence. Your movements are economical, precise, almost delicate. "Murphy," he barks one afternoon, "what the hell are you doing? This ain't a waltz." But later, reviewing scores, he sees you've hit more vital points than any recruit he's trained. There's something unsettling about the quiet kid from Texas who treats weapons like old friends. The army discovers you can shoot, not just adequately, but with an almost supernatural precision that makes range instructors double-check their scoring. You qualify expert with every weapon they hand you: rifle, pistol, machine gun, even the notoriously difficult-to-master bar. One instructor jokes that you must have been born with a rifle in your hands, and you don't tell him how close to the truth that is. What you've learned from necessity: breath control from hiding from your father's drunken rages, trigger squeeze from knowing you have only one bullet for dinner, target acquisition from tracking rabbits through brush, translates perfectly to military marksmanship. The troopship crossing the Atlantic in February 1943 turns most of your unit into green-faced misery, but you find the rolling seas oddly soothing. You're assigned to Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, a unit with a reputation for being thrown into the worst fights. While other replacements write tearful letters home, you're studying Italian phrases from a water-damaged guidebook, preparing for what's coming. The old salts who survived North Africa watch you with knowing eyes. They've seen your type before, the quiet ones who either die in their first firefight or become something altogether different. Your first glimpse of Sicily comes through morning haze on July 10, 1943, as landing craft approach the beaches near Licata. The pre-battle briefing promised light resistance, but the Germans clearly missed that memo. Machine gun fire starts before your boots hit the sand, and the boy next to you, Peterson from Iowa, who showed you pictures of his girlfriend every single day during the voyage, takes 3 bullets to the chest. He drops into the surf, calling for his mother in a voice that gets progressively quieter. You grab his rifle along with yours and keep moving, because stopping means joining him. The textbook invasion you trained for dissolves into chaos within minutes. Your lieutenant steps on a mine 30 yards up the beach, transforming into red mist and scattered pieces. The sergeant takes shrapnel through his throat 10 seconds later. You're a private who's been in combat for less than 5 minutes. But suddenly men are looking at you for direction. Something cold and mechanical takes over. The same feeling you got tracking wounded deer through thick brush. You point to cover, assign fields of fire, and start picking off machine gunners with the methodical patience of someone who learned marksmanship when ammunition was precious. What military historians call your natural leadership under fire feels to you like sleepwalking through someone else's nightmare. You're operating on pure instinct, every survival skill from your childhood suddenly relevant. Reading wind for shooting, same as hunting. Moving through rubble silently, same as sneaking past your father, staying calm while friends die around you. You've been watching people you love disappear your whole life. The only difference is that here, you can shoot back. By nightfall, your unit has pushed 2 miles inland, leaving a trail of bodies, German, Italian, and American, baking in the Mediterranean sun. You've killed at least 6 enemy soldiers that you can confirm, possibly more. The first one looked surprised when your bullet caught him center mass, like he couldn't believe someone so young could shoot so straight. By the 6th, you're not even seeing faces anymore, just targets. Your squad leader, a career soldier named Tipton, watches you clean your rifle that evening with hands that don't shake and says, "Jesus Christ, Murphy, you're a natural-born killer." You don't tell him he's wrong, that you're not natural at anything, just trained by necessity. The Sicilian campaign becomes a blur of hill towns with unpronounceable names, each one defended by Germans who've had months to prepare. You learn that mortars make a distinctive whistle before impact, that the smell of cordite means you're still alive, that stepping over bodies becomes easier if you don't look at their faces. The malaria hits during the second week, turning your world into alternating waves of freezing and burning. You don't report it. 6 soldiers get sent to the rear, and something inside you has decided that forward is the only acceptable direction. Historians still debate whether your Medal of Honor citation for Sicily accurately captures what happened at a nameless crossroads near Palermo. The official record says you held off 2 German companies with a machine gun while wounded, allowing your unit to withdraw. What it doesn't mention is that you were hallucinating from fever, seeing your dead mother in the gun smoke, convinced that retreating meant letting your siblings starve. You fired over 3,000 rounds that afternoon, the barrel glowing red hot, steam rising where your blood dripped onto it. When relief finally arrived, they found you unconscious over the gun, finger still on the trigger, surrounded by brass casings and dead Germans who'd gotten within feet of your position. The landing craft taking you to Anzio in January 1944 smells like diesel fuel and fear sweat, a combination that will haunt you for decades. You've been promoted to corporal after Sicily, not because anyone thinks you're leadership material, but because everyone above you keeps dying. The briefing officers promise this will be a quick thrust to Rome, catching the Germans off guard. You've learned to recognize lies by now. Officers always promise quick victories before meat grinder operations. The coastline approaching through morning fog looks peaceful, which in your experience means it's about to become hell on earth. Anzio proves worse than your darkest expectations. The Germans have the high ground, turning the beachhead into what one historian called the largest prisoner of war camp in the world. You're trapped in a muddy hellscape where movement in daylight means instant death from artillery. Your foxhole fills with water every night, forcing you to choose between drowning and exposure. You develop trench foot within a week, your toes turning black and stinking like rotting meat. But reporting it means evacuation, and you've decided you'd rather die with your unit than live with the shame of leaving. The German 88s become your personal nightmare soundtrack, shells screaming in at all hours. You learn to differentiate calibers by sound. The 88s shriek, mortars whistle, Nebelwerfers moan like demons. On February 16th, a direct hit liquefies your foxhole buddy Martinez while you're sharing a can of cold beans. You spend 10 minutes picking pieces of him off your uniform before realizing you're wasting time. You'll just get covered in someone else tomorrow. The replacement who takes his spot that evening doesn't last until midnight. You stop learning their names. What the official histories don't capture is the psychological torture of constant bombardment. You develop a tremor in your left hand that you hide by keeping it in your pocket. Sleep becomes impossible. Every time you close your eyes, you're calculating shell trajectories. You start seeing patterns in the artillery strikes, convinced you can predict where the next one will land. Other soldiers think you've developed a sixth sense, but it's just hypervigilance cranked to inhuman levels. The medics have a term for it, combat fatigue, but you call it staying alive. During the German counteroffensive in February, you experience something that military psychologists would later recognize as dissociation. As Tiger's tanks roll toward your position, something inside you simply switches off. You're manning a .50 caliber machine gun, methodically shooting at observation slits, feeling nothing as German infantry swarms forward. Your loader gets hit, screaming about his eyes, and you push his body aside to feed ammunition yourself. Hours later, you can't remember his name. The citation for your Silver Star mentions extraordinary heroism under fire, but you remember it as watching yourself from outside your body, curious but detached. The rats at Anzio grow fat on a diet you don't want to think about. They're fearless, running across your chest at night, and shooting them risks giving away positions. You develop a game with a German sniper who's been trying to kill you for 3 weeks. You leave empty ration cans in slightly different positions each dawn, watching through a periscope as he wastes ammunition. It's the closest thing to entertainment in this mudscape. When a lucky mortar finally gets him, you feel oddly empty. He was trying to kill you, but at least he was consistent, predictable. The randomness of artillery is harder to process. Historians still argue whether the 135 days at Anzio were necessary or a Churchill-induced disaster. What's certain is that by the time the breakout finally comes in May, you're a different person. You've learned to sleep standing up in knee-deep water, to eat while stepping over corpses, to gauge wind direction by how bodies smell. Your trench foot has progressed to the point where medics want to evacuate you, but you've perfected the art of walking without limping during inspections. Pain has become background noise, like the constant artillery. You've been promoted to sergeant mostly because you're still breathing. The life expectancy for NCOs at Anzio is measured in days. But you've somehow survived 4 months. When the order comes to advance on Rome, you feel nothing resembling relief, just a vague curiosity about whether Italian dirt will taste different from the mud you've been living in. Southern France in August 1944 tastes like dust and overripe grapes, a welcome change from Anzio's corpse mud perfume. Operation Dragoon is supposed to be a cakewalk after Italy, but you've learned that generals' optimism is inversely proportional to reality. Your malaria picked this moment to flare up again. You're seeing double, sweating through your uniform in the pre-dawn darkness as landing craft approach the Riviera. The medic offers you quinine, but you wave him off. Medicine makes you fuzzy, and fuzzy gets people killed. Better to burn with fever than miss the German who's drawing a bead on you. The beach landing is almost anticlimactic compared to Sicily. The Germans are pulling back, conducting a fighting retreat that's more dangerous than fixed positions. A retreating enemy doesn't have to hold ground. Just kill as many of you as possible while backing toward the Rhine. Your unit pushes inland through vineyard country. That would be beautiful if you could see past the tactical problems. Every stone wall potentially conceals machine guns. Every church steeple holds snipers. You're operating on maybe 2 hours of sleep per day. The malaria fever making everything shimmer like a mirage. On August 15th, near a village whose name you'll never remember correctly, you encounter the machine gun nest that will earn you another medal. The official citation makes it sound planned, heroic. The truth is simpler and uglier. You're tired, sick, and fundamentally pissed off. The German MG-42 has your squad pinned in a drainage ditch that smells like sheep shit. 2 of your men are already hit, crying for their mothers in that way that means they're dying. Something inside you breaks, but it's a clean break, like snapping a chicken's neck. You tell your squad to stay put and start crawling through the vineyard. What happens next enters the realm of military legend, though you experience it as a fever dream. You get within grenade range of the machine gun position, but your first throw falls short. The malaria has screwed with your depth perception. The Germans spot you, swinging the gun around, and that's when the cold thing inside takes over completely. You stand up, fully exposed, and walk toward them firing your M1 Garand from the hip. Military historians call this suicidal, but you're past caring about survival. The machine gunner hesitates for a crucial second, probably amazed that anyone could be this stupid, and you put 2 rounds through his chest. The rest of the gun crew tries to run, but you're already among them with your rifle butt and bayonet. The official report sanitizes what happens next. Sergeant Murphy eliminated the enemy position in close combat. What it doesn't mention is that you beat one German to death with his own helmet, lost in a red haze that has nothing to do with heroism and everything to do with exhaustion and rage. When your squad finally catches up, they find you sitting on an ammunition box, methodically cleaning gore off your bayonet while 6 Germans leak into French soil around you. The malaria gets worse as you push north, but reporting sick feels like betrayal. Your unit has taken 60% casualties since Sicily, and the replacements keep getting younger. You're 20 years old, commanding men who shaved for the first time on the troopship over. They look at you like you're some sort of immortal war god, not realizing you're held together by spite and benzedrine. The pills are easy to get. Medics hand them out like candy to keep exhausted soldiers moving. You develop a system, 2 to wake up, 1 at noon to maintain, 2 more for night operations. Your hands shake constantly now, but everyone's hands shake. It's normal. Everything here is normal. Historians still debate whether your rampage through southern France represents tactical brilliance or advanced combat psychosis. You volunteer for every patrol, every point position, every suicide mission. Not from bravery. You've simply stopped differentiating between dangerous and safe. Everything is dangerous. Everywhere is a potential grave. Your lieutenant tries to send you to the rear for rest, but you laugh in his face. The rear isn't safe. Nothing is safe. At least at the front. You can see death coming. You perfect the art of sleeping while walking. Micro naps between footfalls. Dreaming of Texas dust and your mother's cough. The Colmar Pocket in January 1945 redefines your understanding of cold. You thought Texas winters were harsh, but the Vosges Mountains teach you that hell isn't hot. It's -20 Fahrenheit, with horizontal snow that finds every gap in your uniform. Your unit is pushing toward the German border through forests that look like a Brothers Grimm nightmare. Dark pines heavy with snow that dumps on you at the worst possible moments. The trees explode when artillery hits them, sending wooden shrapnel in all directions. You've seen men killed by splinters the size of fence posts. Your feet haven't been dry in 3 weeks. The trench foot from Anzio was nothing compared to this. You can't feel anything below your ankles, and you're pretty sure that's not a good sign. Changing socks requires a tactical decision. Expose yourself to sniper fire or risk amputation. Most days, you choose the snipers. At least bullets are quick. You've developed a ritual of wiggling your toes every few minutes, just to confirm they're still attached. Sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. The medics have given up lecturing you about proper foot care. They know you won't leave the line. On January the 26th, near the village of Holzwehr, you encounter the scenario that will define the rest of your life. Company B is down to 18 men from a full strength of 235. You're second lieutenant now, battlefield promoted because everyone else is dead or evacuated. The Germans launch a counterattack with infantry supported by 6 tanks. King Tigers that make the ground shake with each advance. Your men look at you with eyes that have seen too much, waiting for orders. The smart play is to retreat, but retreat means exposing your flanks. Instead, you tell them to hold while you check the situation. What happens next transcends normal combat into something historians struggle to categorize. You send your men to the rear while you stay behind with a field telephone, calling in artillery on your own position. When the phone lines get cut, you climb onto a burning tank destroyer, its crew dead, ammunition cooking off inside to use the 50 caliber machine gun. The vehicle is literally on fire beneath you, but it's the only elevated position available. You're standing on a bomb that could explode any second, calmly shooting at waves of German infantry while flames lick at your boots. The mainstream history records that you held this position for an hour, killing or wounding 50 Germans. What it doesn't capture is the eerie calm you feel, like you're floating above yourself, watching some other person perform impossible acts. Your carbine jams, so you use German weapons taken from the dead. When those run empty, you're throwing rocks, helmet, anything at hand. A German tank fires directly at you from 100 yards. The shell passes so close you feel the heat, but you don't flinch. You've transcended fear into something psychologists don't have a proper term for. Later, men will call it heroism. You know it's just the absence of giving a damn. The citation for your Medal of Honor uses phrases like indomitable courage and inspired his men. The truth is simpler. You've been functionally dead inside since Anzio. And this is just your body catching up. When American tanks finally arrive, they find you still at the machine gun, surrounded by spent casings and German bodies. Your uniform is charred. Your hands are burned from grabbing the overheated weapon. And you're laughing, not from joy, but from the cosmic absurdity of still being alive. The tank commander asks if you're hit. I don't think so, you reply, honestly unsure. The adrenaline and benzodrine make it hard to tell what's a wound and what's just normal pain. Historians still argue whether actions like yours represent the highest form of heroism or the complete breakdown of self-preservation instincts. French civilians who witnessed the battle describe it in religious terms. One old woman insists she saw angels protecting you, deflecting bullets. You don't correct her, but you know what really protected you: the Germans' disbelief. They couldn't process that one man would stand on a burning vehicle in the open. Their shots went high, low, wide, anywhere but center mass, because their brains rejected what their eyes reported. You survived through the enemy's cognitive dissonance, not divine intervention. The burning tank destroyer beneath your boots creates its own microclimate in the frozen air, metal groaning as ammunition cooks off in the hull below. You're operating the .50 caliber like you're back in Texas, leading rabbits with your .22, except these rabbits shoot back and wear field grey. A German potato masher grenade lands 3 feet away, and you kick it off the tank's deck with the casual motion of someone sweeping porch dirt. The explosion showers you with frozen earth, but you're already tracking the thrower, putting 2 rounds into his chest before he can pull another from his belt. Your burned hands leave skin on the weapon's grip, but the pain feels distant, theoretical. Below you, the tank destroyer's crew compartment has become a crematorium. The smell mixing diesel smoke with something you refuse to identify. The vehicle lurches as more ammunition detonates inside, nearly throwing you off. But you've developed an eerie balance, riding the dying machine like a cowboy on a mechanical bull. German officers are screaming at their men to advance, but nobody wants to charge the crazy Americans standing on a burning bomb, methodically cutting them down. What military theorists would later analyze as suppressive fire technique is really just Texas squirrel hunting scaled up. You've learned to read body language through gun sights, the slight lean before a soldier breaks cover, the shoulder dip that telegraphs a grenade throw. Your ammunition belt dwindles, so you switch to controlled bursts, making each bullet a negotiation with death. A Tiger tank traverses its turret toward you, the long 88mm barrel swinging like an accusing finger. You put a burst into the commander's cupola, knowing .50 caliber won't penetrate, but hoping to spoil his aim. The shell screams past, close enough that the pressure wave pops your ears. After 40 minutes that feel like 40 hours, you're down to your last ammunition belt. The Germans have pulled back, leaving their dead scattered like broken dolls in the snow, but you can see them regrouping behind a stone wall. That's when you notice the tank destroyer's radio is somehow still functioning, crackling with static. You key the handset with fingers that no longer bend properly, calling in coordinates you've been memorizing throughout the fight. Drop it danger close. You tell the artillery observer. How close? He asks. I'm standing on the target, you reply, which generates a pause that would be comedic if you weren't about to call high explosives onto yourself. The first shells impact as you're sliding off the burning vehicle, hitting the ground hard enough to knock your wind out. You crawl to a shell crater, still warm from recent creation, as American 105mm rounds turn the landscape into a moonscape. Between explosions, you glimpse German soldiers fleeing, some on fire, others simply evaporating in direct hits. The tank destroyer finally explodes, its turret spinning through the air like a giant's discarded plate. Shrapnel hums overhead, each piece singing its own death song, but you're pressed so deep into the earth that you might be in another county. When the barrage lifts, the silence feels wrong, like the world forgot how to make noise. You peek over the crater's rim to see American tanks rolling forward, infantry jogging behind them. A lieutenant you don't recognize jumps into your crater, takes one look at your charred uniform and blood-covered hands, and immediately starts calling for a medic. You wave him off. There are worse hurt than you, always are. He stares at you like you're speaking foreign language. You're Murphy, he says. Not a question. You nod, suddenly exhausted beyond description. Jesus Christ, he whispers, which seems to be everyone's reaction to meeting you lately. The aftermath becomes a blur of morphine and evacuation. Field surgeons pick metal fragments from your hide like prospectors mining for gold, counting 17 separate wounds that you hadn't noticed. The burns on your hands require debriding that makes you bite through a leather strap, even with enough morphine to drop a horse. A psychiatrist visits, asking probing questions about your state of mind during the action. You tell him you felt fine, which is true. You felt nothing at all. He makes notes that you'll never see. Phrases like complete emotional numbing and dangerous dissociative episodes. They give you another medal, another piece of ribbon to pin over the hollow space where your feelings used to live. The hospital in Nancy smells like carbolic acid and gangrene, a combination that triggers memories you'd rather keep buried. You're lying in a bed with actual sheets, the first time since basic training, but sleep won't come. Every time you close your eyes, you're back on that burning tank, except in the dreams. The German infantry never stops coming. They climb over their own dead, faces melting, reaching for you with fingers made of fire. You wake up screaming, tangled in sheets soaked with sweat, and the night nurse stops trying to comfort you after the third time you nearly break her wrist. The other wounded soldiers whisper about you when they think you're asleep. That's Murphy, Math, they say. Like your name explains everything. Killed 200 Germans single-handed. The number grows with each telling, which would be funny if you could remember how to laugh. A replacement lieutenant visits, eager to hear war stories, and you stare at him until he leaves. What would you tell him? That you can't remember individual Germans anymore, just a composite face that visits you nightly, that your hands shake so badly you can't hold a coffee cup without spilling, that you've been dead inside since Anzio and your body just hasn't caught up. Letters from home pile up unread. Your sister Corinne writes about the kids, how they're doing in school, how proud everyone is of their war hero brother. The words might as well be in Sanskrit. That world of schoolyards and family dinners and normal human concerns feels like something you dreamed once, Real life is muzzle velocity and trajectory calculations, the weight of ammunition belts, the specific sound a human body makes when hit by large caliber rounds. You try writing back once, but all you can manage is, "I'm fine, don't worry." The pen shakes so badly your handwriting looks like a child's. The doctors want to send you home. $1 million wound. They call your collection of injuries, like you've won some grotesque lottery. Your hands are contractured from burn scarring. Your left leg drags from shrapnel damage, and you've lost 40 pounds you couldn't afford to lose. Combat exhaustion, they write on forms, which is their polite way of saying your mind is held together with baling wire and spite. But the thought of going home terrifies you more than any German attack. What would you do in Texas? Sit on a porch and pretend to be normal. Teach nephews how to hunt with hands that shake too badly to hold a rifle steady. You check yourself out AMA, against medical advice. After 3 weeks, the division is reforming, taking in replacements who look impossibly young and clean. Your platoon sergeant takes one look at you and tries to send you back to the hospital. You tell him you're fine, demonstrating by field stripping a rifle despite fingers that won't bend properly. He watches this display of stubborn dysfunction and sighs. "You're going to die out here, Murphy," he says. You shrug. Everybody dies somewhere. It's not bravado. You genuinely can't see a future beyond the next firefight. Back on the line, you discover that your reputation has metastasized into something mythical. New replacements stare at you with awe that makes your skin crawl. They've heard the stories, how you can sense German ambushes, how bullets refuse to hit you, how you killed a Tiger tank with a pistol. That one's new, completely fabricated. You want to grab them, shake them, explain that you're not special, just broken in useful ways. Instead, you teach them what you can: how to read terrain, how to move under fire, how to shut off the part of your brain that screams. Most won't live long enough to use these lessons. Historians still debate whether soldiers like you save lives or encourage recklessness. Your presence makes men brave or stupid, depending on perspective. They follow you into situations that would make seasoned veterans blanch, convinced that Murphy's luck will somehow protect them. It doesn't. You collect their dog tags with fingers that no longer shake, not from healing, but from complete emotional exhaustion. The psychiatric term is numbing, but it feels more like watching your life through frosted glass. You function, even excel, but you're not really there anymore. Part of you died in Sicily, part in Anzio, part on that burning tank. What's left is just momentum and muscle memory, a weapon pointed east until it breaks. The war ends while you're recovering from your 18th wound, or maybe 21st. You've stopped counting. VE Day finds you in a hospital in Salzburg, listening to celebrating soldiers outside while staring at a ceiling that keeps morphing into German faces. The nurse brings champagne, but alcohol makes the shaking worse. So you pretend to sip while calculating firing angles to the doorway. Peace feels like a practical joke nobody's explained to you. Your body keeps producing adrenaline for threats that don't exist, leaving you exhausted but unable to sleep, starving but unable to eat. The army wants to parade you around, their most decorated soldier, a living symbol of American heroism. You stand on stages while generals pin more medals on your chest, each one heavier than ammunition belts. Reporters ask how it feels to be a hero. You give them the answers they want because the truth, that you feel nothing, that you can't remember what feeling felt like, would ruin their story. A Hollywood agent corners you at one event, talking about movie rights and American dreams. You agree because disagreeing requires energy you don't have. And maybe California is far enough from everything that the ghosts won't follow. The journey home on a troop ship full of jubilant soldiers feels like traveling with aliens. They're making plans. College on the GI. Bill. Marriages postponed by war. Businesses they'll start. You nod when spoken to, but can't imagine a future beyond the next minute. The ocean that soothed you heading to war now triggers memories of bodies floating in the surf at Sicily. You spend most nights on deck, watching for U-boats that your rational mind knows aren't there. The ship's doctor offers sedatives, but pills make you feel trapped inside your own skull with the screaming. San Antonio hasn't changed, but you're seeing it through different eyes. The streets seem too wide, too exposed, a sniper's paradise. Backfiring cars send you diving behind mailboxes while civilians stare. Your sister Corinne organizes a welcome home party that feels like an ambush. Relatives you barely recognize want to touch you, thank you, treat you like returning royalty. Children ask to see your medals. You escape to the bathroom and vomit, then climb out the window like a teenager breaking curfew. They find you hours later in a park, sitting under a tree, methodically cleaning a pistol you're not supposed to have. Hollywood summons you in 1946, and you go because staying in Texas means disappointing people who think you're someone you're not. The train ride west becomes a geography lesson in anxiety. Every tunnel could hide Germans. Every bridge could be mined. You arrive at Universal Studios pale and shaking, met by publicity men who see dollar signs where a soul should be. They've already started production on To Hell and Back, based on your story, and they want you to play yourself. The irony of pretending to be yourself isn't lost on you, but irony requires emotional investment you can't muster. The first day on set breaks something already cracked. They've recreated a French village complete with battle damage, and the smell of controlled explosions sends you back to Colmar. You come to awareness holding the director in a chokehold, his face purple, while crew members try to pull you off. Security wants to call the police, but the studio smells money. Instead, they assign you a handler, a former Marine who understands you're kind of broken. He teaches you to warn the pyrotechnic crew before each explosion, to count backwards from 10 when the shaking starts, to remember that blanks are just noise. Filming becomes a special kind of torture. You're reenacting the worst moments of your life for cameras, surrounded by actors who complain about the fake blood staining their costumes. They want you to look heroic while storming a cardboard bunker, but your muscle memory keeps taking over. You move too fast, too efficiently, scaring actors who've never seen actual violence. The director keeps yelling "cut" because you're not hitting your marks, but hitting marks in real combat meant dying. Between takes, you sit in your trailer drinking coffee with too much whiskey, reading letters from Gold Star mothers who want to know if you knew their sons. You knew some. You watch them die. You tell them they died bravely, which is what they need to hear. The medicine cabinet in your studio apartment reads like a pharmaceutical encyclopedia. Nembutal for sleep, but not too much or the nightmares break through worse than before. Benzedrine for the morning shakes, though it makes your heart race like incoming artillery. Seconal for the anxiety that builds throughout the day. Dexedrine, when the seconal makes you too foggy to function. You've become a chemist of consciousness, carefully titrating dosages to maintain the illusion of normalcy. The studio doctor writes prescriptions without questions. You're Audie Murphy, war hero. And if you need a little help adjusting to civilian life, who could blame you? Your marriage to Wanda Hendricks in 1949 starts with Hollywood fanfare and ends with her barricaded in the bedroom while you patrol the house with a loaded .45, convinced German infiltrators are in the garden. She tries to understand. reads books about combat fatigue, talks to other war wives. But knowing the cause doesn't make it easier when you wake up with your hands around her throat. The sleeping pills help until they don't, requiring higher doses that leave you stumbling through days like a well-dressed zombie. The press calls you Hollywood's most eligible bachelor after the divorce, not knowing you sleep in a different room each night to confuse the snipers that exist only in your head. The money disappears faster than German ammunition reserves. Your salary from pictures should set you up for life, but you're an easy mark for anyone with a sob story and a handshake. Oil investments that turn out to be holes in the ground. Real estate deals for swampland marketed as future suburbs. A restaurant partnership where your partner empties the accounts and vanishes. You sign contracts without reading them, partly from trust, but mostly from the peculiar apathy that's replaced your survival instincts. What's the worst that could happen? You've already died multiple times. Bankruptcy seems quaint by comparison. Between films, you discover horse racing, and suddenly the adrenaline mathematics make sense again. Calculating odds, reading the animal's body language, the explosive release of the starting gate. It's combat with prettier uniforms. You bet like you fought, all or nothing, chasing the feeling of being alive that only comes with everything on the line. The pills help you study racing forms for 20-hour stretches, seeing patterns in bloodlines and track conditions that may or may not exist. Winning means you can afford better pills. Losing means doubling the dose of what you have to stop the shaking. Terry Hunt enters your life in 1951, a starlet who sees past the war hero facade to the frightened boy underneath. Your second marriage has moments of genuine peace, quiet mornings where the ghosts retreat, her presence better than any pharmaceutical. She gives you 2 sons, and holding them triggers something you thought combat had killed. But babies cry at night, and crying sounds too much like wounded soldiers. You move to a separate bedroom, then a separate house nearby, trying to protect them from what you've become. The marriage survives on geography and her inexhaustible patience. The scripts get worse as the years pass. B-movies where you play variations of yourself. Tough guy, gunfighter, soldier. Each role requiring you to pretend killing is heroic, rather than something that happens when everything human switches off. You take the parts because work means structure, routine, a reason to get out of bed and pretend the pills are working. On set, you're professional, hitting marks and remembering lines despite a blood chemistry that would horrify pharmacologists. Offset, you're buying pills from studio fixers, mixing uppers and downers in combinations that sometimes leave you unable to remember entire days. Historians debate whether your addiction was self-medication or slow-motion suicide. What they miss is that for you, there's no difference. Every pill is a tiny white flag of surrender, acknowledging that the war never really ended, just changed battlefields. You're fighting your own nervous system now, a guerrilla war where victory means feeling nothing and defeat means feeling everything. The studio system enables you because a functioning Audie Murphy is worth money, even if functioning requires a pharmaceutical regiment that would support a small hospital. You've become your own medical experiment, testing the limits of human chemistry to avoid testing the limits of human endurance, knowing that one day the experiment will fail, but unable to imagine any other way forward. The flashback hits during your son's 4th birthday party in 1958. One moment you're watching him blow out candles, the next you're in Holtzvir, the cake becoming a burning tank destroyer. You grab Terry, shove her behind the couch, screaming about incoming artillery while party guests freeze in horror. Your son starts crying, Not the normal tears of a startled child, but the deep, terrified sobs of someone watching their father transform into a monster. When you come back to yourself, you're crouched behind overturned furniture, the birthday cake smashed across the floor like battlefield debris. The children have been hustled outside, and Terry's looking at you with eyes that hold love and exhaustion in equal measure. That night, you wake up with your hands around her throat again, her fingernails raking your forearms as she fights for air. The scratches bring you back. Pain has always been your most reliable anchor to reality. She gasps on the floor while you sit on the bed, staring at your hands like they belong to someone else. "I could have killed you," you say, your voice flat. "I know," she whispers, and the acceptance in her tone breaks something that medals and movies couldn't touch. She moves to her mother's house the next week, taking the boys. You don't fight it. Love means protecting people from yourself. The empty house amplifies every sound. Settling wood becomes German infantry on the stairs. The refrigerator's hum morphs into distant tiger tanks. You start sleeping in the closet with a loaded pistol, the enclosed space feeling safer than the exposed bed. The maid finds you there one morning, curled in a fetal position, and quits on the spot. Word spreads through the Hollywood help network. Murphy's house is a combat zone. You go through 3 housekeepers in a month before giving up, living in increasing squalor that mirrors your internal landscape. Your medicine routine has evolved into a complex ritual. White pills to wake up, yellow ones to smooth the edges, red capsules for the afternoon crash, blue tablets when the anxiety builds toward evening. You've memorized which doctors will write scripts without questions, rotating through them like guard posts. The bathroom cabinet looks like a pharmacy stockroom. Bottles labeled with names you can't pronounce but whose effects you know intimately. Meprobamate for the muscle tension, Dexamol for energy, Tuinal for sleep that never quite arrives. You're taking doses that would kill a normal person, but you haven't been normal since Sicily. Work becomes sporadic as your reputation shifts from war hero to liability. You show up to sets looking like a ghost, eyes sunken, hands trembling until the first dose kicks in. Directors whisper with producers while you wait in makeup, wondering if you'll make it through the day without an episode. You always do. Professionalism is the last discipline standing, but the effort leaves you empty. Between takes, you lock yourself in your trailer, adjusting dosages like a sniper adjusting for windage, trying to find the sweet spot between functional and numb. The gambling escalates as the pills lose effectiveness. Poker games in Hollywood Hills mansions where the buy-in exceeds most people's annual salary. You play with the same detached precision you brought to combat. Reading tells like enemy movements. Bluffing with a stone face perfected under fire. Winning brings moments of clarity. Losing brings blessed emptiness. Either way, you're chasing something you can't name. Maybe the feeling of consequences mattering, of actions having weight. You lose a house in Bel Air to a full house beaten by 4 of a kind. Sign the deed over without expression, already calculating the next hand. Historians studying your decline often point to specific incidents as turning points, but you know better. There's no dramatic moment of fall, just a slow erosion like Texas topsoil in drought. Each pill, each bet, each flashback scrapes away another layer of whoever you might have been without the war. You're a ghost haunting your own life, going through motions that lost meaning somewhere between Anzio and Hollywood. The studio system that created you has moved on to newer, less complicated heroes. You're yesterday's news, a reminder of a war America wants to forget. nursing wounds that don't show up in Technicolor. The business ventures read like a comedy of errors written by someone who doesn't understand humor. Your latest disaster involves a chain of fast food restaurants called Murphy's Mess, a name that proves prophetic when your partner vanishes with the investment capital and leaves you holding contracts you signed during a Dexedrine haze. The lawyers explain you're personally liable for franchise fees, construction costs, and equipment rentals for restaurants that exist only on paper. You nod through the meetings, calculating how many pills you'll need to stop caring. The number keeps increasing. Algeria in 1958 offers escape disguised as opportunity. Some oil executives convince you there's a fortune to be made in Saharan drilling rights, and you invest your last movie earnings in their venture. You fly to Algiers during the height of the Independence War, which feels grotesquely familiar. Explosions in the distance, military checkpoints, the smell of fear sweat in crowded spaces. The oil wells turn out to be dry holes in the desert. The executives con men who targeted you specifically because fame plus desperation equals easy money. You lose everything except a recurring case of dysentery that feels like justice. Back in Hollywood, creditors circle like vultures who've learned patience. The IRS wants back taxes on earnings you've gambled or medicated away. Banks hold mortgages on properties you don't remember buying. Credit card companies send letters that progress from polite to threatening, not understanding that threats lost meaning for you around the time you stood on a burning tank. Your accountant quits after discovering you've been signing blank checks for anyone with a hard luck story. You're giving money to strangers while owing the government hundreds of thousands, he says, incredulous. You shrug. Money is abstract. Pills are real. The medicine combinations become increasingly exotic as tolerance builds. You discover that crushing Dexedrine and mixing it with coffee creates a rush that almost penetrates the numbness. Nembutal suppositories when the pills won't stay down. Injection sites between your toes when your arms become too scarred. A doctor in Tijuana sells you pharmaceutical cocaine for sinus problems, which combines with the amphetamines to create colors at the edge of your vision that might be hallucinations or might be Germans. You stop trying to differentiate. Your third wife, Pamela, enters this chaos in 1960 with the optimism of someone who believes love conquers all. She lasts 2 years before the night terrors, the paranoid episodes, and finding you unconscious in the bathtub convince her otherwise. The divorce papers cite mental cruelty, which seems inadequate to describe living with someone who builds fortifications in the living room and conducts fire and movement drills at 3 a.m. You don't contest it. You're too busy managing a pharmaceutical schedule that requires military precision. This pill every 4 hours, that injection every 6. Careful timing to avoid interactions that previous experiments prove catastrophic. The poker games move from Hollywood mansions to underground clubs in Gardena, where the stakes match the desperation of the players. You're known as an easy mark now, the war hero who'll chase any hand, who plays like losing is the point, which it is. Each lost pot is penance for sins you can't articulate, payment for a survival you didn't earn. You play until your vision doubles, until the cards swim like fish, until someone carries you to your car and aims you toward home. Sometimes you make it. Sometimes you wake up in your vehicle on some canyon road, engine running, unsure if you were driving toward home or off a cliff. Historians who study your financial records express amazement at how thoroughly someone can destroy their own success. What they miss is the logic of it. Every failed investment, every gambling loss, Every bad decision brings you closer to where you should have been since Anzio. Broke, broken, forgotten. You're not failing. You're correcting a cosmic error. Heroes are supposed to die young, not live to become pharmaceutical experiments in tailored suits. The money was always an illusion, as false as the idea that medals could fill the holes blown through your psyche. At least poverty is honest. At least pills don't judge. At least in Gardena poker rooms, everyone understands that the house always wins, and the only choice is how fast you lose. The racetrack at Santa Anita becomes your church, offering a twisted salvation through mathematical probability and thoroughbred genetics. You arrive when the gates open, studying racing forms with the intensity you once reserved for terrain maps. The amphetamines help you see patterns, or create them from nothing, in past performances and breeding lines. You've developed a system involving moon phases, jockey weights, and the sum of post positions that makes perfect sense after 72 hours without sleep. Other regulars avoid you. This gaunt figure muttering calculations and chain-smoking Pall Malls with hands that never stop moving. Your betting strategy mirrors your combat philosophy. Overwhelming force concentrated at the point of decision. No place or show bets, no hedging. Just win tickets in amounts that make bookies nervous. When you hit, and the system occasionally works through pure statistical chance, you immediately parlay everything onto the next race. The track personnel know you by name. Know to have security nearby when you lose. Know you'll be back tomorrow with money borrowed from sources best left unexamined. You're down $250,000 by conservative estimates, but you keep meticulous records in notebooks filled with numbers that dance off the pages when the dexedrine peaks. Between races, you haunt the backstretch, talking to exercise riders and hot walkers who recognize the 1,000-yard stare of someone running from ghosts. They share their own pills, greenies, bennies, black beauties, a pharmaceutical fellowship of the functionally destroyed. You trade war stories for horse tips, discovering that everyone here is fleeing something. The jockey who drinks vanilla extract for the alcohol content. The trainer injecting horses and himself with equal dedication. The track veterinarian who samples his own ketamine. You fit right in. Just another casualty using velocity to outrun collapse. Home is now a ranch in Riverside County that you're slowly losing to creditors. The house sits empty while you sleep in the barn, closer to the horses who don't judge your 3 a.m. patrols or the fortifications built from hay bales. You've installed military surplus communications equipment, convinced you're monitoring German radio traffic. The neighbors complained about the searchlight you mounted on the roof until you shot it out yourself during a particularly bad episode, leaving glass scattered like snow across the yard. Now they just cross themselves when your truck passes. This local curiosity who went to war and brought it home. The pills require increasingly creative procurement methods. Legitimate doctors have cut you off. Their liability insurance unable to cover prescribing lethal doses to America's most decorated soldier. You drive to Mexico, where pharmacies sell anything to anyone with dollars. You cultivate relationships with veterinarians, learning that horse tranquilizers work on humans if you adjust for body weight. Math you can do even while seeing double. A connection at a psychiatric hospital sells you Thorazine meant for schizophrenics, which doesn't stop the flashbacks but wraps them in cotton wool, making the Germans seem less urgent. Your last steady girlfriend, a cocktail waitress named Maria who thinks she can save you, finds your stash hidden in a feed bucket. The sheer volume stops her cold. Thousands of pills in every color, like deadly rainbow candy. This would kill a normal person, she says, holding bottles that rattle like maracas. Good thing I'm not normal, you reply. which sounds like a joke but isn't. She flushes them all, an act of love that sends you into withdrawal so severe you spend 3 days convinced you're back in Colmar, begging her in German to stop the artillery. She's gone when you come back to yourself, leaving a note that says, "I can't watch you die." You appreciate her honesty while scrounging for pills she might have missed. Historians analyzing your descent often cite specific precipitating factors, as if disaster requires explanation beyond momentum. But you know the truth. You've been falling since Sicily, each year just adding velocity. The gambling isn't a problem, it's a symptom. The pills aren't addiction. They're self-medication for wounds that would have killed you in a more honest world. You're not living, you're refusing to die. A distinction that requires increasingly complex chemistry to maintain. Each morning requires recalculating dosages based on the previous day's failures. Each night demands new combinations to achieve unconsciousness. You're a one-man pharmaceutical trial, testing the limits of human endurance, knowing the experiment ends only one way, but curious about the methodology. By 1970, your body is a battlefield where chemistry wages war against time. Your liver, processing industrial quantities of pharmaceuticals for 2 decades, has begun its surrender. The yellowing of your eyes makes you look perpetually jaundiced, though you tell people it's from anti-malarial drugs. Technically true, if incomplete. Your hands shake so badly now that signing autographs requires bracing your wrist against the table. The studio doctor, who used to write endless prescriptions, takes one look at your blood work and refers you to a specialist who uses words like irreversible and end stage. You nod politely and ask if he can prescribe something for the shaking. The movie offers have dried up completely, leaving you to chase increasingly desperate schemes. A producer wants to film your life story as a television series, offering pennies on the dollar for rights you've already sold twice. You agree because the advance will cover this month's pharmaceutical bills, signing contracts you don't read for money you'll never see. Your agent, the fourth this decade, stops returning calls after realizing you're uninsurable. The Screen Actors Guild sends concerned letters about missed dues, not understanding that you can't remember which bills you've paid when each day blurs into the next through a haze of Deximal and Dilaudid. Your sons, now teenagers, visit occasionally with the wariness of zookeepers approaching an unpredictable animal. They've grown up hearing stories of their war hero father, trying to reconcile those tales with the gaunt spectre who patrols the ranch at night, talking to enemies only he can see. You want to be the father they deserve, but wanting requires emotional investment your chemistry no longer supports. Instead, you teach them to shoot, the only skill you trust, watching their forms with eyes that still calculate windage despite the pharmaceutical fog. They humor you. These boys who've learned to hide their mother's sleeping pills when they visit. The final film project arrives like a life preserver thrown to someone who's already drowned. A producer needs you for A Time for Dying, a western so low budget they're shooting in abandoned buildings around Los Angeles. You play Jesse James, which feels appropriate, another American legend who died badly. The costume hangs on your skeletal frame like a shroud, and the makeup artist spends hours trying to hide the toll of decades. Between takes, you lock yourself in a trailer that reeks of sweat and medication, adjusting dosages to hit the narrow window between functional and comatose. On set, you nail every take with the mechanical precision of muscle memory. The director, a kid who wasn't born when you took Sicily, watches in awe as you handle period weapons with casual expertise. You don't tell him that the Colt Peacemaker feels like a toy compared to memories of .50 caliber machine guns. that the blank rounds sound like whispers after real artillery. Your co-stars, has-beens and never-weres grateful for any work, treat you with the careful respect reserved for dangerous relics. They've heard the stories. Murphy pulled a knife on a grip. Murphy passed out in the middle of a scene. Murphy sees Germans in the catering truck. Your daily routine has become a pharmaceutical juggling act that would challenge a licensed chemist. Morning requires 20 milligillies of dexedrine just to achieve consciousness, followed by Librium to smooth the amphetamine edges. Noon brings Demerol for the chronic pain you've stopped trying to explain to doctors. Afternoon demands another round of dexedrine to combat the opiate fog, balanced with Valium to prevent the shaking from becoming visible on camera. Evening is for Placidil, Nembutal, and whatever else might achieve unconsciousness. You've started writing the schedule on your arm in pen, unable to trust your memory from hour to hour. The wrap party for A Time for Dying becomes your last public appearance. You stand in the corner nursing a drink you can't taste, watching people celebrate completing a film that will disappear without trace. A young actress approaches, gushing about what an honor it is to work with a real American hero. You stare through her, seeing instead a German soldier who got too close in Holzwehr, remembering the specific resistance of bayonet through ribs. She backs away. Disturbed by something in your expression, you leave early, driving home through streets that keep morphing into French villages, pulling over twice when the road becomes too uncertain. This is your life now, a ghost haunting its own existence, maintained by chemistry that's failing, waiting for a finale that's overdue by 25 years. The morning of May 28, 1971, arrives with the kind of pristine clarity that makes Los Angeles seem freshly minted. You're standing in the kitchen of your ranch house, counting pills with the methodical precision of a quartermaster preparing for siege. The math isn't working. You need 30 pills to get through the day, but only 23 remain, and your regular suppliers have gone dry. The irony isn't lost on you. America's most decorated soldier, defeated not by German artillery, but by pharmaceutical logistics. You dry swallow 3 dexedrine and wait for the familiar electric surge that makes existence bearable. The phone call from Atlanta comes while you're studying your reflection, trying to recognize the skeleton wearing your face. A business associate claims there's a deal brewing, something about prefabricated housing for veterans, using your name to secure government contracts. You've heard variations of this pitch 100 times, each one ending with empty pockets and legal troubles. But he's offering to fly you out. And Atlanta means new doctors who don't know your history, pharmacies that haven't blacklisted you yet. You agree, already calculating how many pills to pack for a weekend trip. Terry drives you to the airport, her face carefully neutral in that way of someone who's given up arguing. Your boys wanted to come, but you said no. Airports make you jumpy. Too many sight lines, too much open space. She helps you check the briefcase you insist on carrying. Doesn't mention the way your hands shake signing papers. At the gate, she hugs you longer than usual, and you wonder if she knows something you don't. Call when you land, she says. You promise. Though promises are just words now, as meaningless as medals. The private plane waiting at the aviation terminal is smaller than you expected. A twin-engine Aero Commander that reminds you uncomfortably of artillery spotting aircraft over Germany. The pilot, a weekend warrior type named Claude Crosby, chatters about weather patterns while you calculate escape routes from the cabin. Your traveling companions include the business associate who smells like failed dreams and cheap cologne, plus 3 others whose names you don't bother learning. The pills are wearing off, leaving you raw and twitchy as you strap into a seat that feels like a coffin. Turbulence hits over the mountains east of Los Angeles, sending the small plane bucking like an unbroken horse. The others grip their armrests, but you're oddly calm. This is familiar. Like flak over Germany. Chaos, you understand. The pilot fights for control as storm clouds close in. His cheerful patter replaced by terse communications with air traffic control. You've heard that tone before. In radio men calling for support that won't come. Lightning illuminates the cabin in snapshot bursts. Each flash bringing memories, muzzle flashes at Anzio, burning tanks at Colmar, the awful brightness of white phosphorus. The engine sputters first on the left side, then the right. The propellers windmilling uselessly as the pilot announces with professional calm that you're going down. The others scream, but you're silent, watching mountains rush up through rain-lashed windows. This is the ending you've expected since Sicily, delayed by 27 years of chemistry and stubbornness. No Germans, no heroics, just gravity and aluminum versus granite. You think of your boys, hope they remember the good moments between the episodes. You think of Terry, grateful she's not here for this final failure. Historians still debate whether you grabbed the controls in those last moments, reverting to combat reflexes, or sat peacefully accepting the inevitable. The crash site on Brush Mountain, near Catawba, Virginia, suggests instantaneous impact. No suffering, no final agonies, just the sudden stop you've been approaching since 1943. They find pill bottles scattered among the wreckage, enough pharmaceutical evidence to fuel decades of speculation about impairment. But you know the truth in those final seconds, stone sober or completely sedated. The mountain was always waiting. The memorial service brings out Hollywood stars, military brass, and politicians who use words like hero and sacrifice without understanding their weight. They bury you at Arlington with full honors, the rifle volleys echoing like the guns you'll never escape. Your grave becomes a pilgrimage site for those who need heroes to be simple, uncomplicated by the reality of survival's cost. The medals go to a museum where school children learn sanitized versions of your story, never knowing about the pills, the flashbacks, the nights spent screaming in closets, which is perhaps the final kindness, letting the myth outlive the man. Bronze and marble instead of pharmaceutical bottles and borrowed time.